What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. I'm your host at Scotty Drown. You can find me on all social media platforms at that screen name at Scotty Drown. And of course, you can find my co-host here, Zach Noble, at Zach Noble on Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow so you can see all of his NBA hot takes. He also has his own podcast that he runs as well. So be sure to give him a follow and check out all of his content. With that being said, we are here today to discuss the top 10 centers in the NBA as of right now, going into the 2023-24 season. This is going to round out our positional rankings of the offseason. So we're going to finish strong here. But nonetheless, how are you doing today on this fine Tuesday, my friend?
Doing great. It's NFL week. I'm jacked up, man, just as much as you
Absolutely.
are. I can't wait. I'm a diehard NFL guy too, and it was great getting involved in the college football scene this past weekend. It was a beautiful
Absolutely.
weekend up north at the lake, so no complaints. How about you?
Love it, man. Yeah, no complaints. I do have a little bit of a complaint over the weekend because we did our show last Wednesday. I think we got on and recorded. Man, on Thursday, right? Went to the gym, did back exercises, and like did something to my neck, back, like right shoulder area.
Oh no.
And like the whole weekend, my back and my neck was like strained. I couldn't even move at times because like I was getting back spasms. I wake up yesterday,
Shoot.
man, and it's completely gone.
Oh, well,
Completely gone. I feel
blessings.
good
There
now.
we go.
I
Let's
feel
go.
fine. Yeah, hey,
Let's
look,
go, baby.
if it was game 7 on Sunday, I was good to go, but I did have the back spasms, man. But no, that's my only complaint from the weekend. I wasn't able to have any like too much fun. I just had to relax and make sure I can walk this week and next
Yeah,
week,
that
especially for the
sucks.
wedding.
Glad you're feeling good for the wedding here coming up because that'd been a major blow. But
That's
yeah,
how you gonna dance with a stiff back and stiff neck. But no, it should be good. Should be good. Gonna try to not tweak anything before then. Uh, but no, thanks for asking, man. I do appreciate that. Before we get into the top 10 centers, I wanted to ask you quickly. Most disappointing thing from the USA loss the other day.
I mean, just losing in general, it just
Yeah,
sucks. I mean, it's just a bad rap. But honestly, the fact that it didn't mean anything, really, because we still moved on,
yeah,
didn't. I mean, it really meant zero other than the world can pull a game off us.
yeah,
But I don't know. It just shows that this team, against a team that's well put together, that can share the ball, it just shows this team is just surviving off talent yet. So it
yeah,
definitely shows that they're not unbeatable.
yeah.
I mean, that would be there. There's vulnerabilities there, but honestly, I mean, not a ton. I mean,
Not a
just
big deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
It sucks to lose. It always does because you
Always
expect
sucks to
to
lose.
win
Sucks to
every
have to see
game,
those
but
headlines, right? Like,
yeah.
especially after the Noah Lyles comments. Of course, that comes. It has nothing to do with the Noah Lyles comments in reality. Like, if we're being honest, but it's just funny after that. You have all the people that were saying that the NBA people shouldn't be called world champs now coming out and saying, "Look, they can be beat." But
Right.
yeah, no, it was funny nonetheless. Jaren Jackson, he put up one of those classic stat lines, man. 5 fouls, one
What
rebound.
was
Five
damn.
fouls and
Okay.
one
I
rebound of
love
play.
it. I had all the
Your
Jaren
favorite
Jackson
defensive player of the
people.
year.
Yeah, I just made a message about that today on Twitter, and people came at me in
I
numbers,
saw
so
that.
they
I
can
saw
they can
that.
suck they can suck it for that.
Yeah. Hey, we discussed that, man. I mean, that
Right.
was a joke to give it to Jared Jackson Jr. And I like Jared Jackson Jr. I'm
Yeah.
not a Jared Jackson Jr. hater. Just
No.
last season, man, you only play so many games, and as you mentioned in that message I saw, um, you found out in half of them. So, yeah, how
No,
good are
that was
you?
that
So,
was a joke. He really only followed out in 4% of them, and that everybody
really?
came at me. Yeah, no, but
I'm
like,
glad you fact checked that here because I was going
yeah,
off of that. Because like
no,
when you watch him, it doesn't seem like out of the realms of possibilities, but most of the time he's just getting into foul trouble. He's not actually fouling out.
yeah, I'm getting my Elon numbers up there a little bit with that, but I stand by everything I said there. But with that said, it's like foul trouble is the same thing as falling out. Like you
Yeah,
may have gotten to 5 and been out valuable minutes. Like if he doesn't get in the foul trouble, his team wins. I don't know, 5 to 7 more games probably.
yeah,
But like you can be terrible at fouling and not fall out of the game. It's just the way it
yeah,
goes.
Sure.
But I'm more focused on the games played aspect, and that was the
Yeah,
eliminator for me. And I mean, outside like the two things, I mean, made it a no brainer for me why he shouldn't have got it. And just the competition is thick. There's plenty of valuable guys out there that
yeah,
deserve the awards. So
yeah.
I
I
hate
do
to
agree.
see awards given to people who miss, I don't know, what is it, 15, 20% of the season, just as many games as probably closer to as many games as he follows out.
Yeah, literally, man. So, no, we discussed that on the last episode about Jaren Jackson Jr. If he can get the fouling under control, then that'll help him a lot. But that comes with mentality, that comes with basketball IQ, and knowing what you can do and can't do. But nonetheless, let's get into this top 10 centers list that we got to dig into today, Zach. I'm going to toss it to you first here this week, my friend. I believe I went last week with the power forwards. This was an interesting list, man, because I had a ton of like honorable mentions or guys that
Mhm.
I feel could have been interchangeable with probably about the last 3 to 4 guys on my top 10 list. So I'm interested to see where you end up in comparison to where I have ended up here. But who's going to come in at number 10 for you, man?
Yeah, so that's a great note there. I mean, it's pretty competitive when you get to, I mean, for this, it's I'd say 9 through, I don't know, 13 for me that you can argue could be at this spot here, but it's all a tier. And
Yeah.
the center position more than any position comes down to defense, and like
Yeah.
the best player and valuable are two different things in my opinion. My rankings more so based on the best player. So yes, I might think a player below a guy is more valuable. And I feel this all the time. I talk
Yeah.
about this in basketball nonstop. Is you might be way more valuable of a player, but you might not be the better player.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't make a ton of sense to people, and I can explain it as things go here, but um, and value has a lot to do with contract as well. So
Fair.
I'm not really taking contract into place when I'm doing these rankings, but if I did, it would probably look a lot different. So some of the guys left off, um, Jonas Valanciunas, 13,
Yeah.
um, DeAndre Ayton, number let's see, he's a tie for 11. And
Yeah.
then I got
He
Wendell
was one I
Carter.
went back and forth on, man.
Yeah, I
DeAndre
know.
Ayton. He's an interesting center, man. He's
Him,
he's an
him and
interesting
Wendell
guy.
Carter Jr. I couldn't decide who I got there, but
Fair.
I'll say 11, 12, those guys. And then my number 10 is Jared Allen.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting, man.
And
Jared.
so,
So talk to me about Jared Allen. Talk to me about why you pick him over, like, say, a DeAndre Ayton or even a Wendell Carter Jr., because I'm right there with you on those guys.
yeah, so this is where I actually do give the nod to value because I think as a player alone, Ayton is probably the best of those guys I just mentioned. Like the actual player, his production, what he can do, his ceiling. But when
Yeah.
it comes to playing the center position and what I value, Jared Allen, I think his production wise, I mean, rebounding is so important to me. He's the best
Yeah.
rebounder of that group. Also, he's the best defender of that group.
Yeah.
And that's what trumps it. I mean, I think you can argue he's the best player, but value wise, he for sure is.
Yeah.
That's not to be debated. He played 68 games last year, was on the high end of that group, 64% from the field, high analytically across the board. But that group outside of Wendell Carter Jr. isn't very good at passing. So it
Yeah.
gets really tough. Um, and to be honest, if you're a great passer at the center spot, you really stand out because they just
Yeah.
don't really exist right now.
Yeah.
There's not a ton
Jokic.
of them. Yeah.
Jokic, Sengun,
Yeah.
he's a good passer. I mean, Bam Adebayo is a pretty good passer, but
Sabonis
Jokic
is
is
really
levels ahead of those
right.
guys.
Sabonis is really good as well. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, good
Vooch would
call out.
be in the next group there, but yeah, not many. And I mean, you could argue Jokic is the best passer in the game. Uh,
Yeah,
but
not
yeah,
just centers, but in the game.
other than that, I mean, shot blocking wise, Jared Allen gets it done. His team's winning a bunch, and he's a huge part of that. He's the anchor of that defense, of a great defense, I'd say, in Cleveland. So, what do you got?
Interesting, man. Jared Allen comes in at number 11 for me, and it's funny because I ended up going with DeAndre Ayton at number 10, and
Yep,
it's
same.
exactly what you talked about at the beginning of your ranking list there, and it's this player versus who would you really rather have on your team at the center position? And I agree with you. I think I would rather have Jared Allen in most cases because when I'm looking at the center position, I am valuing rim protection and finishing ability, rebounding ability,
Yeah,
right? Putbacks, that type of stuff, hustle. You get up into the top five. That's where you start to see the offensive standouts on top of the defensive presence. So to that point, I think these guys down here, like you said, they're kind of interchangeable, just depending on what you like. I went with DeAndre Ayton, man, 18 and 10 guy, right? The numbers are there. It's just in the postseason, especially, you start to see how much that does not fit, whether that's with the Phoenix Suns. But there's not a lot of value for DeAndre Ayton, obviously, as they've been trying to trade him around the league. So it is interesting when you think about the style that DeAndre Ayton plays. Like, where does he get better, right? Like, what can he try to get better at in order to increase his value in your eyes?
so the only way he gets better is if he's on a really bad team, in my opinion. I think he's still,
Right, where he
again,
gets
needs
the
a lot
ball
of
force fed
development.
to him.
Yeah, and he's force fed. He's able to just make a lot more mistakes and try to expand his offensive game. Because coming into the league, that's I knew exactly who DeAndre Ayton was.
Yeah,
It's what he is, and it's a lot of
that's
it
what he is
came on
now.
his opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a little bit of it, you can't fault the guy. He has improved on defense. I'm not going to deny that, but like he needs to become a lot better to be a
yeah.
super important player in
It's
the
the rim
NBA.
protection.
Right. And just, I mean, banging and not being afraid and having more confidence
Yeah.
on that end. He definitely gets very timid.
It's one
He's
of those
closer to,
things where you see CP3 pointing him into a spot, and it's like, that's great that you have CP3's leadership,
yeah,
but he should have the assertiveness to do that himself, like, and know where he's
right.
supposed to be.
No, his game all depends on his offensive game. It really
Yeah,
does. I mean, and you don't see too many games having 2+ blocks. It's just not the big man that even Phoenix needs. That's why I've always been a proponent of them trading for
fair.
more depth.
Yeah,
And I've been a huge advocate of that the last couple years even. So I
yeah,
think he can be a lot better. I think he has a lot more to give, but I just don't necessarily see that in Phoenix.
yeah,
Think he's definitely overpaid for what he does production
yeah.
wise, and he's a uh, product of a very high powered offense too.
Do you think that he's part of that center community that is kind of phased out in today's NBA? Like, is his game outdated?
No, because I mean, he's a slightly above average defender. I mean, you could
Yeah.
definitely say average. Takes are all over the place on him when it comes to that, and I understand either way, but I definitely think he's closer to Cat on defense than he is Bam Adebayo.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think that's a great way to put it there. He does come in at number 10 out of respect for the numbers that he puts up, the talent that is there. But I do get you when you talk about fit. Even Jared Allen on the Phoenix Suns. I mean, that's a much better fit on
Yeah,
that Phoenix Suns roster. So I do get your point there. Who do you have
like
at
even
number
in
9?
Memphis, you put him
Yeah,
next to Jaren Jackson Jr.,
yeah.
he'd be much better in my opinion.
That is,
Because
yeah. That's a great
then his
point. I
defense
do.
isn't as needed either. But number 9, this, like I said, this is the highest you could probably have, that tier of guys that we just mentioned. But number 9, I got Miles Turner here.
Okay. Talk to me about that because I have Miles Turner a little bit higher.
Love it. Miles Turner to me took a huge jump last year, but he's very uh, one-dimensional-ish. He definitely is becoming a better creator with his shot, but he still isn't too fluid within an offense. He's
Yeah.
still just his own guy, which is a great player. He's very good. I like Miles Turner offensive game way better than DeAndre Ayton even. And then you
Yeah.
add his defense there, like I don't think those two players are even close. I think Miles is quite a bit better than DeAndre Ayton, which is crazy to think
Yeah.
about because Ayton's highs on offense are probably a little more. I don't know. I'd have to dive into the numbers further. People say it might be a little more consistent or higher, I guess you can say. But Miles had some 40-point explosions last year as well, and I think he's just going to keep getting better offensively. But he's not a very good passer.
Yeah.
He's about equal as a passer to Ayton, so um, you could hope that Ayton becomes Miles Turner, to be honest. And yet, you flip those two guys around, I think situations are a little different, which I think the defense fits Aiton more with the fours in Indiana if they develop the way I think they will right now. Like it's a prime landing spot where Miles Turner would be the perfect five in Phoenix right now.
Yeah.
And I can't go on and say that enough. Like they're the clear cut favorite with Miles Turner instead of DeAndre Ayton, in my opinion. But people call me crazy on that. And Miles Turner's super valuable
Yeah.
outside of his passing ability. Um, I don't think his shot selection's bad, but it could be in a team with full of great players.
Man, you make some good points because like when you talk about the playmaking ability of Miles Turner, it does make me think. It makes me think about my list, but I guess I'm gonna stick with my guns here nonetheless. But man, it has me really thinking here. So I went with Brooke Lopez at number 9 here. And now
Sure.
Brooke Lopez, he had a great season last year. I believe he was in the top 3 runner mates for defensive player of the year, right
Yep.
up there
More
with Jaren
value.
Jackson Jr. Mind you, I do wonder how much of a product of a perfect fit he is in Milwaukee,
Yep.
playing with a guy like Giannis, right, who can drive in the lane. He plays as like this hybrid power forward where Brooke Lopez can just sit at the 3-point line and then protect the rim on the other side of the floor. He's a perfect fit, and that's not his fault. I'm not trying to take too much credit away from Brooke Lopez there. But I do wonder how much more he would be able to do in a different setting. There was rumors of him maybe going to the Houston Rockets this offseason in free agency. I would have loved to have seen what that looks like, although don't get it from their point. I know there's a guy, I don't know if this guy is on your list, Sengun. And mind you, correct me if I'm wrong if I'm saying his name wrong there. But he's a guy with
Şengün,
a
yeah.
ton of potential at the center position. So I was curious as to why they would even be looking in that area for kind of a replacement there. But nonetheless, Brooke Lopez, I do love everything about him, man. I look at him. He's exactly what you would want as your like prototypical center in today's day and age. You talk about the floor spacing, the protecting the rim, but when you look at Miles Turner, I mean, there's an argument to say that Brooke Lopez is a better player, right? Like, am I wrong there in your opinion? Like, you may have Brooke Lopez higher in your rankings anyways. So that's what kind of has me going back and forth. Like, who's the more reliable option for their role on offense? Because I looked at Miles Turner, and the reason I put him up so high is because I get what you're saying, the lack of playmaking, the lack of being able to kind of get your own bucket or get your own shot or even post play, right? But
Yep.
the floor spacing and the rim protection is what I value. And I love that he can shoot the 3 ball at above league average from the center position. And he shoots quite a bit of them, but then also can be one of the top rim protectors in the league. So it is interesting. I went with Brooke Lopez here, but I think those guys are kind of in a tier with themselves. Like they're kind of the same caliber player in a sense. But
They're
man,
identical.
the bottom
They're
of
really
this list
identical.
is so interesting because you've mentioned like Wendell Carter Jr., Jared Allen, all guys that I feel like more than reasonable to be on this list. Jonas Valanciunas, right? Like these are all guys that do a lot of things that you like at the center position. But yeah, I come out with nonetheless Brooke Lopez at number 9 here, man.
Wendell Carter Jr. is the best passer of all of those guys we've mentioned so far, and
Yeah.
you could have a bunch of these guys up to even 7. I probably wouldn't
I
be
had
too
Wendell
mad,
Carter all the way up
but
at 8, and I ended up
well,
going back and, like, I'm
yeah,
like, am I getting biased here?" You know what I mean?
for
He's a
sure.
Duke guy. I have to question that about everything now, but, I just went with, like, the more established guys in this
And
case a
Wendell
bit.
can climb with being on a better team. It's kind of,
Yeah,
I mean, a shitty thing,
more
but
talent
like
around him.
I truly believe because I mean, he's gonna get better. He makes people around him better. I believe that. But I got Brook at 9. I mean 8. So
Okay,
Turner 9, Brook 8. I mean, they're essentially the same player,
and
but
I have him flipped. I have Turner at
Miles
8, so
Miles has more opportunities, and you can argue defensively if Brook. Like I think both of them are defensive player of the year candidates.
yeah,
I had Miles winning it a couple years back. Brook should have won it last year if it wasn't for Mobley. One of those two should have won it for sure, I think.
yeah,
But Brook, I have just slightly above. I'm giving him his due next to Miles Turner because he played a lot more games. He played like 10 more games than Miles. Um, with that said, Miles Turner, like he had the most efficient 40-point game last year. He had 86.7% on his 40-point game, going 13 of 15 from the field. Like his explosions were super efficient.
yeah,
Like, but he still can be inconsistent. But his high is way higher than most,
yeah,
and his ceiling is incredible. And I still think he's just unlocking that because with Sabonis, that brutal fit for a while there.
yeah,
Um,
kinda
now
restricted him.
it's opening, yeah. Now it's opening things up, and definitely think Miles could climb this list. I don't think Brooke will ever get higher than 8 here. Who do you have
I
at
would
8?
love I would love to see Miles Turner, get into some more action with Tyrese Halliburton. Let
Yep.
him create for him in a sense like that a little bit more this season. So we'll see how that works out in Indiana. But yeah, I got Miles Turner at number 8 here, so I don't need to go into too much detail about that.
Good.
So far we got Aiton on my side, Aiton, Lopez, Miles Turner at number 8.
Same. I got Allen at 10, Turner at 9, Brook at 8. I just left Aiton off. But you didn't have Jared Allen on here, did you?
No, I didn't. And it's
That's fair.
like I said, it is something I he would come in right at number 11. I don't know. Maybe I'm sleeping on Allen last year. Maybe Mobley stole a little bit of his show in a sense last season. But no, I am a fan of Jared Allen. I've got to watch him a good bit in Brooklyn and then now in Cleveland as well.
So those three guys I mentioned, my 8 through 10 right now, and then even outside of that, I'll just focus on those three guys. I think they're all super valuable players. Like
Yeah.
they're all valuable. Like then we get to my number 7 here. Like he's not that valuable of a player. He's just a really good player, and he is very good, and he's super underrated. And that's Nikola Vucevic.
Okay.
Um, he's incredibly underrated. People hate on him
Yeah.
year after year. He's on another good contract. All he does is produce. He's a good passer. He's not a great passer, but um, he's just a, a mark of consistency. Like last year, he played 82 games. The year before, 73. The year before, even though he was traded, he still played 70. He doesn't miss a ton of games compared to most, except early in his career. Once he got past that, but he can do it all. He really can. But he's a product. I mean, also of not being a very good defender and being on a team with full of pretty bad defenders for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why people value defense so much at the center
Yeah.
position. They underrate Nikola Vucevic as the player he is. And I understand. Just like you'll see some of the guys before him that are mainly all defense,
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
can argue. But like, and I always say, like, you put Vucevic and great defenders around him, like he's way up charts because I think he's that good.
No, Vucevic, he's such an interesting Vooch. He's such an interesting case, and he did not make my top 10. I'll be
Well,
out front here. He did come in at 13 for me, and it is because of that defensive Perception, I guess you could call it, right? The perception that he is not a good
Called
defender.
it.
Yeah, it's a percent because there's not a great defender on that roster, on that
Right.
starting lineup, right? Like
Right.
that's the simple
Caruso
truth.
and
We're not a great defensive team in general. So maybe it is a little unfair. I do love everything you pointed out about him. The marker of consistency. You talk about offensive bag. He probably has one of the deepest offensive bags
right.
of the center position. So I will give you credit there.
Great
He
post
did
game,
come
mid
in
range.
12 13 range for me, but maybe I'm weighing defense a little bit more heavily in that case. My number 7, I feel like it kind of fits into your it's not as deep as that. I think this guy is a valuable player. I think he's also a talented player. But it is going to be I'm kind of backtracking here. I'm actually going to go Kristaps Porzingis. It kind of falls into the same category as the next guy that's on my list. I'm going with Kristaps Porzingis at number 7 here, just because of the injury history. Played, I believe, his most games in his career last season for the Washington Wizards. Definitely had his best season of his career last year when it comes to numbers. But it's the injury history, right? That worries you with KP. It's the amount of games played. But the talent's there. It's been there since he was in New York. He looked like they labeled him the unicorn, right, in New York City. The Knicks goes to Dallas. You think he has a great fit there with Luka Doncic. Thought that duo would do well. Ends up floundering out there. Then heads to Washington to play with Beal and Kuzma and that dismal team that they had there. But nonetheless, he shined amongst that team. He did play up to the level you would expect from Kristaps Porzingis of a few years ago. And I do love the fit in Boston. I think he's going to fit pretty well with them. I think he'll be able to eat off of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the attention that they draw on offense. But I also love the rim protection factor as well. You would like to see maybe a little bit more girth on him, maybe, a little bit more size
Yep.
to guard the center position. But I do love the rim protection. I love the floor spacing, and I do love his offensive capabilities, having his back to the basket, being able to post up, having those type of moves in his repertoire. So I do like Kristaps Porzingis' game here.
Damn it, dude. I'm glad you brought him up because, to be honest, I wasn't even
Is he a
thinking
tweener?
about him. He is a tweener, but like you're right, he's a center. Like he's definitely a center right now. In Boston, he might go back to the power forward spot. And we didn't
Yeah.
talk about him last week, so um,
Because he's
I
definitely
agree
a
a
top
hundred.
10 power forward or a top 10 center, right?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I have him above Vooch, but not sure if he's above this next guy. It's fair to question. He's definitely. I consider him a better player, but the other guy above him, value
He's
and
got better
player
numbers.
wise combination. Not sure, but Kristaps would be right here. Everybody else behind him would go backwards, so he'd technically fall into my number 6 here. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. Um, but my number 6, I will say, who I did have down, is Rudy Gobert.
Yeah. We actually agree here. Yeah, Gobert.
Yeah,
And man, Gobert is tough because what I value in my center position, right? We talked about this defense, rim protection. He's one of the best, if not the best rim protector
yep,
in the NBA. The offensive woes, though, they are very prevalent or prevalent for Rudy Gobert. You do wonder if you give him the ball on offense, what the hell is he going to do with it? But when you talk about rim running, being able to catch lobs, right? You love that factor. The rebounding, he's a great rebounder as well. And when you look at what you ask of your center, I think if you put him in a good situation, put Rudy Gobert on the Phoenix Suns, for instance, right? I think he could prosper there, right? Next to guys that can score the ball. You put him in Minnesota, it's a weird fit with Cat, even though it seems like they could balance each other out, right? He's a defensive rim protector. Cat's a floor spacing big. But then you get to where can Cat guard fours. And so that fit is just is clunky there. Didn't work out in Utah for whatever reason with Donovan Mitchell. But nonetheless, I still love and I still value Rudy Gobert's game in this league. And I think he is your prototypical center of this day and age, rim running, rim protection. and just crashing the glass.
So, yes, don't disagree with anything you said, but Rudy Gobert was super underrated last year. Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, yes, points and rebounds just dipped a couple decimals, not even
yeah,
really. I mean, like, let's be honest, like, numbers wise, it wasn't even much different. Yes, he slowed down a tad, maybe gave up a little bit at times too, but I mean, it wasn't a very good defensive team built around him. It was him and Jaden
yeah,
McDaniels was the defense last year until
yeah,
Ant got good towards the end of the year. But even then, that was inconsistent, and it took a while till maybe the last 30 games was Ant a good defender. But with that said, I mean, Rudy anchored the Timberwolves all year, and Cat was out most of it, and we were still a top 7 defense most of the time Rudy was in the game.
yeah,
Um, he is a one-man defense to himself, still funnels everything his way. He played 70 games last year, really respectable.
yeah,
Um, but let's see, his field goal percentage was still 66%, dipped quite a
yeah,
bit from 71 the year before, but it's like he still put up 13, 12 rebounds
yeah,
almost a steal and 1.4 blocks. Like still very solid numbers, great advanced numbers, and then the team defensive numbers were all basically because of him and Jaden McDaniels. Um, so it'll be interesting this year when Cat comes back and plays a full year healthy and how that fit. I think it's a bad fit. I think it's not great, but I think the talent can exceed the fit
yeah,
because Cat's more athletic than people think. But Rudy Gobert, I mean, free throws is what holds him back on offense more than anything. But
yeah,
he's a good finisher, good lob threat. He's a really good screener. Does a lot of great things. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He
yeah.
sees
You
the
like
hate.
that?
He
Yeah,
sees the hate because he talks about it. He
yeah,
go through his like tweets and he's seeing all these reports where he's not in the top 15 bigs and all that.
yeah. That's
But
craziness.
it was interesting because he wasn't very good in FIBA. He was had
Yeah,
a down year. I think he's been pretty good before. I don't really remember the last go around, but he was bad this year. Vucevic was great, 20 and 10, high percentage, 44% from three. Nobody talked about Vucevic this year, but
yeah.
Rudy was bad. So with that said, number 5, that leads me to Domantas Sabonis.
Agree again. Yeah, that's
All
exactly
right.
where I have Sabonis. And see, I went back and forth on Rudy Gobert and Sabonis because Sabonis did his thing in Sacramento last year. And he was doing his thing in Indiana. That was just not a very good fit, right? Had him playing power forward most of that time in Indiana beside Miles Turner. But when you look at Sabonis, man, he does it all. I mean, 19 points per game. He's obviously one of the best rebounders in the game. Trying to see how much 12 rebounds a game. So he did average more rebounds than Rudy Gobert last season. Barely, right? Percentage points there, but nonetheless did average more points. And he's a great playmaker, right? 7 assists per game last year. One of the best playmakers at the center position when you talk about it. So I did want to give some respect to Domantas Sabonis, although I am a believer that I don't know how well that works in the playoffs when you need a rim protector. You need somebody
Yeah.
that is going to play defense in the paint, especially for a team like Sacramento who doesn't have a ton of size at the power forward position, doesn't have a rim protector at that position either. It makes me wonder how effective is Domantas Sabonis' game once you get to the postseason. He doesn't even have the size that you see with Nikola Jokic. There were similar questions about Jokic before last postseason. Can he defend the paint? Can he hold his own on defense? He's obviously smart enough to do whatever he needs to do on the defensive end. He also has the size as well to affect shots, to body up on bigger guys. So you look at Sabonis, I kind of look at them in the same light. Obviously, Sabonis is not in that tier, but when you talk about play style in a sense, he does have that playmaking ability. But I went back and forth between him and Gobert just because of that defensive prowess, that rim protection. I love that in my center, and that's a big thing for me when you got guys going downhill towards the rim and there's nobody to protect it in Sabonis. So I went back and forth there. I gave the nod to Sabonis' playmaking,
Okay.
the offensive capability, and the rebounding, of course.
No, I respect it. I got to give due. He was the main engine. He had a career high in assists, 7.3, one of the league leaders there. I mean, at the center spot, outside of Jokic, he's the best passer in the league. I value that so much. Had a
Yeah,
career high in field goal percentage, 62%. You could put him number 4 here just because of his regular season. It's the playoffs that
fair.
separated number 4 and 5 with him. He played 79 games. Like, solid defender, above average, especially in that Sacramento. But like, yeah, I completely fine with the Rudy Gobert stuff. If you would have had these two swapped, I could accept. But
Yeah,
I just think quality of player value, it's all there in Sabonis.
yeah,
So that leads me to my number 4, Bam Adebayo.
yeah.
And Bam, I
I think
mean,
we're
you
gonna
could
have the
argue,
same rankings here. I do,
oh man,
because I have Bam
Bam
Adebayo at number 4 as well.
Bam with his playoff resume, man, you could honestly argue at number 2. I truly
Yeah,
believe that
I truly agree.
because, all right, good to hear. If you want to give player his due, he earned it. He could have definitely been number 2 on this list because he dominated. He was oftentimes Miami's best player,
Yeah,
more valuable than Jimmy, quite often, anchored that defense for sure. Big matchups, did decent, as good as he could against those heavy hitters as well. But uh, Bam is just rock solid, getting better every year, two-way player. Uh, I think he could get maybe as high as 3 on this list, basically based on games played, but I
yeah.
don't ever see him getting above the guys above him, really.
That's a great point. 3 is interesting. I'll go ahead and give you my 3. I already gave you my 4 with Bam Adebayo. My 3 is Anthony Davis.
There we
Games
go.
played.
Same.
Games played. That's what it comes down to with AD. He's got to stay on the court. We know that AD. You could argue. I'm not going to argue him against Jokic, but you can argue him against Embiid at this point, right? Like when you talk about playoff effectiveness and being available in the postseason, AD has a ring, right? So he's been able to play through the
Mhm.
postseason. He's proved that. But yeah, Bam Adebayo, he's such an interesting character because, as you mentioned, you could argue him all the way up to number 2 based on the playoffs, and I almost believe that his style of play is the second most effective in the postseason of this group of players. Now, I mean, you can argue Anthony Davis, and obviously, I'll just give you the rest of my list. Joel Embiid 2, Jokic number 1, obviously. Um, Embiid, it's the postseason. It's not only the lack of games in the postseason, but it's also the effectiveness in the postseason. I looked down this list of, centers last year in the postseason. Embiid, 5 double doubles. And I'm not going to sit here and like count double doubles, but he should be rebounding the hell out of the ball. Like when I'm looking at Embiid and I'm looking at the rest of this Sixers roster and what they need in the playoffs, they needed him to rebound the basketball. Like they needed him to be
Mhm.
their top rebounder. And he averaged under 10 rebounds. He only had 5 double doubles throughout the entire playoffs. So that's just not enough. That shows a little bit of effort that's lacking there from Embiid, in my opinion. So when it comes to effort, Bam's got him and AD beat in that department.
Yep.
And then playmaking. I think playmaking, he's a better playmaker than Embiid, and maybe even AD. I'm not as familiar with AD's playmaking ability. I just don't get to see it as often. So I don't want to discount him for something that he just may not be responsible to do in that offense. But Bam, honestly, you talk about Sabonis right after Jokic. I would probably put Bam right underneath of those guys because you can run an offense through Bam. He's not going to be your leading scorer, but you can run the offense through him. And to that point, he will give you 18, 19, 20 points a game as well because he has a solid mid-range jumper. He can finish. So I really love Bam's game. There has been contemplation. I'll put it into perspective here for you very plainly. There's been contemplation in my mind. I don't even think Miami would do it, but Bam in some draft compensation and some pieces for Embiid. I'm not
No,
gonna
we
sit here
talked
and
about this. I
slam the
love it. Yeah.
table for that. I'm not
No.
gonna slam the table for it, but like I don't even think Miami would do that. And I think they're right for not doing that because Bam has shown that he's reliable in the postseason, man. But just to
Yep.
put it in perspective of how I value Bam, yeah, I've contemplated that thought a
Yeah.
couple times here, man. But I gave Embiid the benefit of the doubt. He is the league MVP this year. He is my guy. He is the focal point of the Sixers offense. He does get double and triple teams thrown at him on a game-to-game basis, and he tends to handle it probably as well as you can at his size. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt there, but I have major concerns for Embiid going forward. I know I gave you some grief over your list yesterday, I think it was. I think you had him 8th in your top 10 players going into next season. But to be fair, I know I'm biased and I know that I'm coming at you, but I'm trolling mostly
Yeah.
because there's arguments against Embiid, especially postseason play, that weigh him down in all of these conversations. And it's coming to light now, right?
Yeah.
You've had several road dogs with Embiid that were supposed to get him over that hump, and it just hasn't happened yet. And a lot of the time, that responsibility has fell into his lap. That's why Jokic obviously wins the NBA championship, NBA Finals MVP. He's a 2-time MVP. That's why he clearly established himself ahead of Embiid last postseason. I'll throw it to you there to kind of round out your rankings, man.
Yeah. So I mean, Jokic is in a tier of his own, really. I mean, AD,
I agree.
has shown regular season and postseason throughout his career, just never put them together to be in that conversation right now,
Fair.
where he could be in the argument with Jokic if he was just available and consistent. But I think that's out the window. He's the
Yeah.
only one that's proven to be show a lick of an inkling close to Jokic, to be honest, for the overall season. But Embiid's got the talent. It's just got to put it together, and it comes down to the brain, the mentality, and decision
Mindset.
making
Yeah.
outside of the availability in those moments where it matters. But
He
yeah, I
gets
mean,
very small in big moments. That's my
yep,
problem with Embiid.
yep. So like between these four guys, it's really interesting. It's like um, Embiid, AD, Bam, like you could argue I'd take Bam in the postseason going forward between the three of them, even though you get
Yeah.
like a lack of upside there. But you just know what you're getting and know the value you're getting if you could build the
Yeah.
team around him. But picking a between AD and Embiid for um, the regular season or just overall going forward, it's just a toss up. Like I think it's so much of a toss up for their careers. That's a real question.
Yeah.
And I
I would
like
give the
to
nod to
make
AD, but yeah.
I don't know if I would just because of the
Really?
MVP, but, like, it's the MVP and the title, so it's
Yeah.
only, like and he had a
It's fair.
LeBron there, so it's like AD, I think, has had overall more better playoff moments, so that's
Yeah.
where I'd lean towards AD, because he's done it for longer in the playoffs, but Embiid's had enough of, postseason, um games where it could make it an argument.
Yeah.
But I'd say I'd lean towards AD as well, just because of the chip and postseason consistency.
It's fair. He did
But
play with LeBron, though. Yeah, that is fair.
exactly, that's a huge. That's everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to round up these rankings, only guys that we didn't really talk about that aren't in the top 10 that I could see shooting up there. I mean,
Yeah.
Victor Wemby, obviously, if he
Yeah.
should be classified as a center going forward. So that'll be a big one. But maybe like a Nick Claxton, if he can develop any more of an offensive
Nick
game.
Claxton
People
is
love,
somebody, yeah, I would probably put him in the top 20, right? Like
yeah,
he's probably like a 16, 17 guy for
nailed
me.
it. I got him 16. Shangun, I had him at 18, but he could
Yeah.
really climb up. Just he's competing with a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, maybe like a Jalen Duran. But
I like that pick, man. Yeah. He showed signs
that's my
last year.
notes. Yeah, and you look back on this, it's value versus quality of talent, really, and upside.
How are you feeling about guys like a Robert Williams, Mitchell Robinson? Are you kind of out on those guys?
I had him
Um,
in my top 20. I mean, I
Zubac,
had Horford 15, Rob Williams 21, Onyeka Okongwu 22, Mitchell Robinson 20. But like, they don't see any more. They don't seem to get any better. I think they are what they are.
yeah,
You
they
know?
are what they are. Yeah. I would agree with you. Yeah, I think we covered pretty much the up and coming talent, the established guys, and then the guys that are kind of where they are. I think we covered it well here. We agreed on the top 4 or top 5, I think. So that's good.
Yeah,
'Cause I was worried coming in, man. I do think
yeah,
the center position is based on perception a lot more than any other position, just because it almost feels like we're just, for a lot of these guys, we're just asking for them to do certain things. We're not asking for them to be the guys, right? So it's an interesting position group. Nonetheless, I'm going to get us out of here, my man. I know we got some meetings that we need
yeah.
to address here, but nonetheless, thank you for joining me today, Zach. It was a pleasure. We are going to be going on a 2-week hiatus. I'm getting married, going on a honeymoon. So we
Good
will
luck,
be
man.
away,
Have a
but we will be
blast.
back.
All love.
Thank you, Zach. Have a great one, my friend. We will be back in about 2 to 2.5 weeks. We'll get into our preseason rankings. We'll start discussing teams as a whole, and we'll move forward from there. But have to take some time off to enjoy my partner, us getting married and going on a beautiful honeymoon in Hawaii. So I'll try to get some views out there from Hawaii, get some content out there, but it may not be NBA content nonetheless. But guys, thanks for tuning into this episode. That will round out our positional rankings for this 2023-2024 NBA offseason. I will see you next time. Have a good one and peace. Thank you again, Zach.